Eleanor Gray clutched her grandmother's golden ring, the last remnant of a life that once held promise, as she staggered down the dusty main street of Copper Canyon, Arizona Territory, 1874, her hunger stronger than her sentimentality. 3 days without food had hollowed her cheeks and dimmed the light in her eyes that once caught the attention of every gentleman caller back east. The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Eleanor approached Hank's Mercantile, the only general store in this forgotten mining town where she'd been stranded when her stagecoach departed without her. Her traveling companions had abandoned her after thieves attacked their party. Those bandits took everything except the ring she'd hidden in her boot, a simple gold band with a small ruby that had been passed down through generations. Inside the Mercantile, the scent of fresh bread nearly brought her to her knees. Her empty stomach contracted painfully as she approached the counter where a burly man with a graying mustache was arranging canned goods. "Excuse me, sir," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper, pride making her words stick in her throat. "I wonder if you might, that is, I have this ring." She held out her grandmother's gold band with trembling fingers. "I need bread, just enough to survive until I can find work or passage east." The shopkeeper glanced at the ring without touching it. "Sorry, miss. Can't help you. Already got more trinkets than I can sell." Eleanor's vision blurred with unshed tears. She'd been denied at 3 establishments already. One more rejection might break her completely. "I'll take a loaf of that sourdough," came a deep voice from behind her. Eleanor turned to see a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and piercing hazel eyes watching her from beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but unlike most cowboys who passed through, there was something in his stance that spoke of confidence rather than recklessness. "And whatever the lady needs," he added, placing coins on the counter. "That's not necessary," Eleanor protested, clutching the ring tighter. "I can pay my own way." The cowboy's gaze dropped to her hand. "Keep your ring, miss. You'll have bread and—" He paused, something softening in his expression. "Well, no one should go hungry in Copper Canyon while I have money in my pocket." "Hunter Ford," he introduced himself, tipping his hat slightly. "Just rode in with a small herd. Planning to stay a while." "Eleanor Gray," she replied, her voice steadier now despite the lightheadedness from hunger. "And I cannot accept charity, Mr. Ford." Hunter studied her for a moment before nodding to the shopkeeper. "2 loaves, then. And I'll need someone to help with accounts while I'm in town. Can you read and write, Miss Gray?" "I was a schoolteacher in Boston before—" She trailed off, unwilling to explain how her fiancé's betrayal and her father's gambling debts had forced her west to live with a cousin who, as she discovered upon arrival, had died months earlier. "Perfect," Hunter said, as if the matter was settled. "You can work for your bread. Fair enough?" Eleanor felt her defenses wavering. This wasn't charity, it was an offer of employment, and employment meant dignity. "What accounts need keeping, Mr. Ford?" "I've just bought the old Fletcher ranch. Need someone with a head for numbers to help me sort through what's there and what's needed." He handed her one of the loaves. "Eat first, then we can discuss terms." Eleanor took the bread, its warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, then with more strength, "I accept your offer of employment, Mr. Ford." Hunter nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Good. I'll expect you at the Fletcher place tomorrow morning. Anyone can point you in the right direction." As Eleanor bit into the bread, savoring the simple pleasure of no longer being hungry, she had no idea that this moment, this exchange of bread for work rather than for her precious ring, would change everything. "Miss Gray," Hunter said as he prepared to leave. "That ring. Family heirloom?" Eleanor nodded, swallowing her mouthful of bread. "My grandmother's, all I have left of home." Hunter's expression darkened for a moment before clearing. "Then you were right not to trade it. Some things are worth more than their weight in gold." As he walked out into the blinding sunlight, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder what memories had flashed behind those hazel eyes. There was a story there, perhaps as complex as her own. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the scent of sage hanging in the air as Eleanor made her way to the Fletcher ranch. She had spent the night on the floor of the church, the kindly pastor's wife, insisting she stay rather than sleep on the streets. The Fletcher property lay 2 miles outside of town, a modest spread compared to the vast ranches further south, but substantial enough to support a small herd. As she approached, Eleanor could see that the main house had fallen into disrepair. Broken windows, missing shingles, and a sagging porch all spoke of neglect. Hunter Ford was in the corral, working with a spirited bay gelding when Eleanor arrived. She paused at the fence, watching as he moved with quiet confidence around the nervous animal. There was something graceful about the way he handled the horse, speaking in low tones and moving deliberately. When he spotted her, he handed the lead rope to a young stable hand and made his way over. "Miss Gray," he said with a nod. "Glad you found the place." "It wasn't difficult," Eleanor replied. "Everyone in town seems to know you've purchased it." "Small towns," Hunter said with a shrug. "Nothing stays private for long." He gestured toward the house. "It's not much to look at now, but it has good bones. Come inside and I'll show you what needs doing." The interior of the house was as neglected as its exterior, but Eleanor could see potential beneath the dust and cobwebs. Large windows would let in ample light once cleaned, and the wood floors, though scuffed, were solid underfoot. "Old man Fletcher died last winter," Hunter explained as they entered what must have been an office. "His son tried running the place but gave up after a few months. Sold it to me for a fair price, considering." The desk was piled high with ledgers, receipts, and correspondence. Eleanor approached, already sorting through the chaos in her mind. "I need to know where we stand," Hunter continued. "What's owed, what's owing, what supplies are needed, and what assets remain. I'm decent with figures, but I need someone who can make sense of all this while I handle the physical work outside." Eleanor rolled up her sleeves. "I can begin immediately." "There's a room upstairs," Hunter said, suddenly seeming slightly uncomfortable. "It's clean enough. I thought, that is, if you need lodging." "Are you offering me room and board in addition to employment?" Eleanor asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. "Yes," Hunter replied directly. "You'd be doing me a service. Place needs a woman's touch, and it's safer than town accommodations. My foreman and his wife have the cabin out back, so your reputation would remain intact." Eleanor considered the offer. The practicality was undeniable: no more nights on church floors, and a real chance to rebuild her life. "That's very generous, Mr. Ford." "Hunter," he corrected. "If we're to work together, we might as well use our given names." "Hunter," she agreed, testing the name, "and you may call me Eleanor." He nodded, seemingly pleased. "The arrangement would be temporary, of course, until you decide what you want to do next." Eleanor looked down at the ring on her finger. "Thank you. I accept." As the days passed, Eleanor found herself settling into a routine at the Fletcher now Ford Ranch. Each morning, she rose early to help the foreman's wife, Martha, with breakfast for the small crew of ranch hands Hunter had hired. Then, she would spend hours in the office unraveling the tangled finances of the property. What she discovered was both concerning and promising. The land was good, water rights secure, but the previous owners had made several poor decisions that had left the operation in debt. She presented her findings to Hunter one evening as they sat on the newly repaired porch. "The cattle you brought with you will help," she explained, showing him the figures she had meticulously copied into a fresh ledger. "But you'll need at least another 100 head to make this place profitable by next year." Hunter leaned back in his chair, studying her in the fading light. "You've done more in a week than I expected to accomplish in a month." Eleanor felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "I enjoy the work. It's fulfilling to create order from chaos." "Is that why you became a teacher?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. They had shared meals and conversation, but neither had delved deeply into the other's past. "Partly," she admitted. "I always loved learning, and helping others learn seemed natural. But mostly, it was one of the few respectable professions available to a woman who needs to support herself." Hunter nodded thoughtfully. "And how did a Boston schoolteacher end up nearly starving in Copper Canyon?" Eleanor's fingers instinctively went to her grandmother's ring. "It's not a pleasant tale." "Few of our stories are," Hunter replied quietly. "But I'd like to hear it if you're willing to share." So as the desert sunset painted the sky in fiery hues, Eleanor told him about her father's gambling debts, how he'd mortgaged their home without telling her mother, and how after their deaths, she'd discovered she had nothing. She told him about her fiancé, Richard, who had promptly broken their engagement when he learned she was penniless. I had a cousin in Tucson, she concluded. I used the last of my savings to travel west, only to discover upon arrival that Sarah had died of fever months before. The stagecoach was attacked on the journey to the next town where I might find work, and the other passengers left me behind in Copper Canyon while I was tending to a woman who'd fainted from the heat. Throughout her story, Hunter had remained silent, his expression darkening only when she mentioned her former fiancé's desertion. "The ring?" he finally asked. Eleanor twisted it on her finger. "My grandmother gave it to me before she died. She said it was for my wedding day, but that I should keep it close until then because it represented the strength of the women in our family." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "I nearly traded that strength for a loaf of bread." "You would have found another kind of strength," Hunter said, "the kind that comes from survival. But I'm glad you kept it." There was something in his tone that made Eleanor look at him more closely. In the gathering twilight, his features were softened, and for the first time, she noticed the small scar near his temple and the hint of silver at his temples. Despite his relatively young age, he couldn't be more than 35. "What about you?" she asked. "What brought you to Copper Canyon?" Hunter was silent for so long that Eleanor thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "I grew up in Texas. My father had a small spread, nothing fancy but enough to live on. When the war came, he fought for the Confederacy while I stayed behind to run things. He never came back." Hunter's gaze was fixed on the darkening horizon. "After that, I drifted, worked cattle drives, did some scouting for the army, tried my hand at prospecting. Never stayed anywhere long." "Until now," Eleanor prompted when he fell silent again. Hunter turned to look at her then, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "Until now," he agreed. "A man gets tired of drifting eventually, starts thinking about putting down roots." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Hunter stood, breaking the spell. "It's getting late," he said. "You should get some rest. We have that meeting with the bank tomorrow." Eleanor nodded, rising from her chair. "Good night, Hunter." "Good night, Eleanor." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Eleanor found herself wondering about the parts of Hunter's story he hadn't told. There were gaps there, years unaccounted for, but she understood the need to keep certain wounds private until they had sufficiently healed. The next morning, they rode into town together for their meeting with the banker. Eleanor wore her one good dress, carefully mended and pressed, and had arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style. She noticed Hunter watching her as he helped her onto his wagon, his eyes lingering a moment longer than necessary. The banker, Mr. Simmons, was initially dismissive of their business until Hunter outlined his plans for expanding the ranch operation. Eleanor presented the financial records she had organized, explaining how the debts could be managed and repaid within 18 months if the bank would extend a loan for additional cattle. "Miss Gray has a remarkable head for business," Hunter commented when they finished their presentation. "She's identified several opportunities for increasing efficiency that I wouldn't have considered." Mr. Simmons looked surprised. "I wasn't aware that ladies concerned themselves with such matters." "Perhaps more should," Eleanor replied evenly. "Bankruptcy doesn't discriminate between gentlemen and ladies." Hunter's lips twitched with a suppressed smile. To Eleanor's satisfaction, they left the bank with an agreement for the loan they needed. As they walked down the main street toward the mercantile where Hunter needed supplies, he surprised her by saying, "You were impressive in there." "Thank you," she replied, unused to such direct praise from a man regarding her intellect rather than her appearance. "I meant what I said. You see things I don't, opportunities. Efficiencies. We make a good team." Before Eleanor could respond to this unexpected assessment, a commotion further down the street caught their attention. A group of rough-looking men had dismounted in front of the saloon, their loud voices carrying on the still air. Hunter's posture changed immediately, his body tensing as he moved slightly in front of Eleanor. What is it? She asked, sensing his sudden alertness. Trouble, he replied tersely. Those men, I recognize a couple of them from my days on the trail, particularly that one. He nodded toward a tall, lean man with a pock-marked face and an elaborate gun belt. Edwin Tate. Bad reputation. Works as a hired gun when he's not stealing cattle. Eleanor felt a chill despite the warm day. Should we leave town? Hunter shook his head. We'll finish our business quickly. No need to draw attention. But fate had other plans. As they passed the saloon on their way to the mercantile, Edwin Tate stepped directly into their path. Well, look what the wind blew in, Tate drawled, his eyes cold as they fixed on Hunter. If it isn't Hunter Ford, thought you would have been hung by now. Hunter's expression remained neutral, though Eleanor could sense the tension radiating from him. Tate, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Excuse us. Tate made no move to step aside. His gaze shifted to Eleanor, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Aren't you going to introduce me to your lovely companion? He asked with a smile that held no warmth. No, Hunter said flatly. Our business is our own. Tate chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. Still as friendly as ever, I see. He tipped his hat mockingly to Eleanor. Madam, you should be careful of the company you keep. Some men have hidden pasts. I find most men do, Eleanor replied coolly. Excuse us, please. Her response seemed to amuse Tate, who finally stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. Of course. Wouldn't want to keep a lady waiting. As they continued toward the mercantile, Eleanor could feel Tate's eyes following them. Once inside the store, she turned to Hunter. What was that about? She asked quietly. Hunter was selecting supplies with quick efficiency, his movements betraying his desire to be gone quickly. Old trail business, nothing for you to worry about. It certainly didn't seem like nothing, Eleanor pressed. He implied you should have been hung. Hunter paused, his hand resting on a sack of flour. When he looked at her, his expression was guarded. There was trouble some years back. A cattle drive from Texas to Kansas. Accusations were made, not all of them true. What kind of accusations? Hunter shook his head. This isn't the time or place, Eleanor. But I promise you, I'm not a man who needs to fear the law. That's all you need to know for now. Eleanor wanted to press further, but something in Hunter's expression stopped her. Instead, she helped him select the remaining supplies, and they completed their purchases in tense silence. The ride back to the ranch was equally quiet, with Hunter scanning the trail ahead with vigilant eyes. It wasn't until they were unloading the wagon that he spoke again. I'm sorry for the unpleasantness in town, he said. I didn't expect to encounter Tate. Who is he to you? Eleanor asked, passing him a crate of canned goods. Hunter sighed, setting the crate down on the porch. We worked the same cattle drive 8 years ago. Things went bad. Men died. Tate and his friends tried to lay the blame at my feet, but in the end, the truth came out. His jaw tightened. Most of the truth, anyway. And now? Eleanor prompted when he fell silent again. And now he's here, which means trouble is coming. Hunter's gaze met hers, serious and direct. I won't lie to you, Eleanor. Having Tate and his men in town changes things. It might not be safe for you here. Eleanor felt a flash of fear, quickly followed by indignation. Are you dismissing me? No, Hunter said quickly. I'm warning you, giving you the choice to leave if you want to. And if I don't want to? Something shifted in Hunter's expression, surprise, followed by something warmer. Then we face whatever comes together, Eleanor nodded. Decision made. Good. Because I have no intention of running away. I've done enough of that already. The faintest smile touched Hunter's lips. You're a surprising woman, Eleanor Gray. So I've been told, she replied, picking up a smaller package from the wagon. Now, shall we finish unloading these supplies before dinner? Martha mentioned she was making stew. That evening, as they sat around the kitchen table with Martha and her husband Frank, the conversation inevitably turned to the strangers in town. Tate, Frank growled, the older man's face darkening. I remember that name from when I was driving cattle through the nations. Bad business, that whole affair. Hunter nodded, his expression grim. He's not here by coincidence. Someone must have told him I bought this place. What do you think he wants? Eleanor asked, setting down her spoon. Revenge, most likely, Hunter replied, or to finish what he started years ago. Martha exchanged a worried look with her husband. Should we be concerned for our safety? Hunter considered this before answering. Tate's quarrel is with me, not with any of you. But men like him don't always make distinctions. We'll need to be vigilant. No one works alone, especially out on the range. I'll spread the word to the hands, Frank said. We'll keep watches at night. Eleanor listened to these preparations with growing concern. What had seemed like a simple fresh start for both herself and Hunter was rapidly becoming complicated by the shadows of the past. Later that night, unable to sleep, Eleanor made her way downstairs for a glass of water. She was surprised to find Hunter still awake, sitting at the kitchen table cleaning his revolver by lamplight. He looked up as she entered, his hands never pausing in their practiced movements. Couldn't sleep? No, she admitted, pouring herself water from the pitcher. Too many thoughts. Hunter nodded, understanding in his eyes. About what happened in town. Partly, Eleanor said, taking a seat across from him, but also about what you haven't told me. I understand that everyone has secrets, Hunter. But if I'm potentially in danger because of yours, don't I deserve to know why? Hunter was silent for a long moment, his hands finally stilling. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his face, accentuating the strong line of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze when he finally met her eyes. You're right, he said simply. You deserve the truth. He set the gun down carefully and leaned back in his chair. 8 years ago, I was working as a trail boss, bringing a herd up from Texas to the railhead in Abilene. Tate and some others signed on in Fort Worth. I didn't like them, but good hands were scarce after the war. Hunter's eyes took on a distant look as he continued. We were crossing through Indian territory when the trouble started. Cattle going missing. At first I thought it was Kiowa or Comanche, but then I caught one of Tate's friends driving 5 head away from camp one night. They were stealing from their own drive? Eleanor asked, surprised. It was more complicated than that, Hunter replied. They had a deal with a gang operating near the border. The plan was to make it look like Indian raids, sell the stolen cattle to the gang, and still collect their wages for the drive. Hunter paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. When I confronted the man I caught, he drew on me. I was faster. You killed him, Eleanor said softly. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. Yes, Hunter confirmed. The next night, Tate and 3 others tried to ambush me. They'd realized I knew about their operation. In the fight that followed, 2 more men died, one of Tate's friends and one of my loyal hands who'd come to warn me. Eleanor could see the weight of those deaths still rested heavily on Hunter's shoulders. Tate escaped, made it to Abilene ahead of us, and spread a story that I was working with renegade Indians to steal cattle, that I'd murdered men who discovered the truth. By the time we arrived with what was left of the herd, there was a deputy marshal waiting with questions. But they believed you, Eleanor concluded. You weren't arrested. The other hands backed my story, and we found evidence of Tate's dealings among his friends' possessions. The marshal decided it was self-defense. Hunter's expression darkened. But Tate disappeared before he could be apprehended. I've heard rumors of him over the years, working as a hired gun, rustling cattle. Nothing I could prove. And now he's here, Eleanor said, understanding finally dawning. In Copper Canyon. Yes? Hunter met her gaze directly. I don't know if he's just passing through or if he came looking for me. Either way, his presence means danger. Eleanor considered all she had learned. The man across from her had killed in self-defense, but killed nonetheless. Yet, instead of fear, she felt an odd sense of relief at finally knowing the truth. Thank you for telling me, she said, for trusting me with this. Something shifted in Hunter's expression, a vulnerability he rarely showed. Few people have heard the full story. Most just know pieces what Tate spread, or what came out during the marshal's investigation. Is that why you move around so much? Eleanor asked, to avoid the rumors. Hunter nodded slowly. Partly, and partly because nothing ever felt like home after Texas. He hesitated, then added quietly, until now. The weight of those two simple words hung in the air between them. Eleanor felt her heart quicken as she realized what Hunter was implying. This place, this life they were building together, even if temporarily felt like home to him. And to her surprise, she realized it was beginning to feel that way to her too. "We should both try to get some sleep," Hunter said eventually, breaking the moment. "Tomorrow will come early." Eleanor nodded, rising from her chair. "Good night, Hunter." As she turned to go, his voice stopped her. "Eleanor?" When she looked back, his expression was solemn. "If you want to leave, if you feel it's too dangerous to stay, I'll understand. I can arrange passage to wherever you want to go." Eleanor considered his offer for only a moment before shaking her head. "I'm staying," she said with quiet determination. "This is where I want to be." The relief in Hunter's eyes was unmistakable, though he tried to hide it with a nod. "Then we'll face whatever comes together." "Together," Eleanor agreed, the word feeling like a promise. The next few days passed in a state of watchful tension. Hunter increased security around the ranch, sending riders out in pairs and posting guards at night. The town remained quiet, with only occasional reports of Tate and his men drinking in the saloon or asking questions about local ranchers. Eleanor continued her work on the ranch books, but now she found herself listening for unusual sounds, watching the road whenever she was near a window. The peaceful routine they had established felt fragile now, threatened by the shadows of Hunter's past. One afternoon, as Eleanor was hanging laundry with Martha in the yard, the sound of approaching horses made both women freeze. Hunter and most of the hands were checking fence lines in the north pasture, leaving only old Frank and a young ranch hand named Billy at the main house. "Get inside," Martha whispered urgently, already moving toward the door. Eleanor followed quickly, her heart pounding as she caught a glimpse of 4 riders approaching. Even at a distance, she recognized Edwin Tate's lean figure leading the group. Inside, Frank was already reaching for his shotgun. "Billy," he called to the young man who had come in from the barn. "Ride for the north pasture. Tell Ford we have visitors." Billy nodded and slipped out the back door toward the corral. "Martha, Eleanor, stay inside," Frank ordered, moving to the front window. "No matter what happens." Eleanor's mouth went dry with fear as the riders drew up in front of the house. She could hear the creak of saddle leather, the snort of horses. "Ford!" Tate's voice rang out. "Come on out and face me like a man." Frank exchanged a look with Martha before stepping onto the porch, shotgun held ready but not aimed directly at the riders. "Mr. Ford isn't here," he called. "I'm Frank Winters, the foreman. Something I can help you with?" Tate's laugh carried easily to where Eleanor stood just inside the door. The famous Hunter Ford hiding behind his workers? That's not the man I remember. "No one's hiding," Frank replied steadily. "He's out working, as men who own honest ranches do." One of Tate's companions, a heavy-set man with a bushy beard, spat on the ground. "Honest? That's rich. Ford's been a thief and a murderer since he was old enough to hold a gun." Eleanor felt a flash of indignation at the accusation. Without fully thinking through her actions, she stepped out onto the porch beside Frank. "Miss Gray," Frank hissed in warning, but Eleanor ignored him. "Mr. Tate," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is private property. You and your friends need to leave." Tate's eyes widened slightly in surprise before a slow smile spread across his face. "Well, if it isn't the lady from town. You've got spirit. I'll grant you that." His gaze traveled over her in that same unsettling way. "What's a fine-looking woman like you doing mixed up with Hunter Ford?" "My relationship with Mr. Ford is none of your concern," Eleanor replied coldly. "Now please leave." "Oh, but it is my concern," Tate countered, leaning forward in his saddle. "You see, I make it my business to know who associates with men who've killed my friends. Makes me wonder if maybe you don't know what kind of man you're defending." "I know exactly what kind of man he is," Eleanor said with quiet conviction. "A better man than you, by all evidence." Tate's expression hardened. "Careful, lady. Pretty words won't stop bullets if things get ugly." "Is that a threat?" Frank demanded, raising his shotgun slightly. The tension in the air was palpable as Tate and his men shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. The standoff was broken by the sound of more riders approaching from the direction of the north pasture. Eleanor felt a wave of relief as Hunter appeared, leading several of his ranch hands. His expression was thunderous as he took in the scene before him. "Tate," he called as he dismounted, his voice cold and controlled, "you're trespassing." Tate turned his horse to face Hunter, a predatory smile playing at his lips. "Just paying a social call, Ford. Getting acquainted with your staff." His eyes flicked to Eleanor, especially the lovely lady there. Hunter moved to stand between Tate and the porch. "Say what you came to say, then get off my land." "Straight to business as always," Tate said with mock disappointment. "Fine. I came to settle an old debt." "The only debt between us was paid 8 years ago," Hunter replied. "2 men dead because of your greed." "3 men," Tate corrected sharply, his amusement vanishing. "You killed my brother in that ambush." Eleanor felt a chill at this revelation. Hunter had never mentioned that one of the men had been Tate's brother. "Your brother drew on me first," Hunter said evenly, "just like you told him to." "Liar!" Tate snarled, his hand dropping to his gun. Hunter didn't move, though Eleanor could see the tension in his stance, ready to react. "If you want to try your luck against me, Tate, I won't stop you. But leave my people out of it." For a moment, it seemed Tate might draw right then, but after a tense silence, he relaxed, though his eyes remained cold with hatred. "Not today, Ford, but soon." He gathered his reins. "I'll be around. We both know how this has to end." With that, he wheeled his horse and rode off, his companions following after casting threatening glances back at the ranch. Only when they were well out of sight did Hunter turn to face Eleanor and Frank. "Is everyone all right?" Frank nodded. "No harm done, though it was a close thing before you arrived." Hunter's gaze fixed on Eleanor, concern evident in his eyes. "You shouldn't have confronted him." "I couldn't just hide inside while they threatened your home," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. Something flashed in Hunter's eyes, surprise, admiration, and something deeper that made Eleanor's breath catch. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Inside." Once in the house, with the ranch hands posted as lookouts, Hunter paced the length of the kitchen while Eleanor sat at the table. "Tate won't let this go," he said finally, stopping to face her. "Not until one of us is dead." "Because of his brother," Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. Hunter nodded, his expression grim. "I didn't know at the time. Found out later that the man I killed in the first confrontation was Tate's half-brother. Makes his grudge personal." "What are you going to do?" Hunter ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I don't know. I could ride into town, try to end this, but Tate won't fight fair. He'll have his men waiting to shoot me in the back." "Then we need the law involved," Eleanor suggested. "Sheriff Blake is a good man, but he's getting old. Against 4 gunmen." Hunter shook his head. "And there's no proof they've done anything illegal. Not yet." Eleanor considered this problem. "Then we wait for him to make a move, but we prepare for it." Hunter studied her with a mixture of concern and growing respect. "This isn't your fight, Eleanor." "It became my fight the moment Tate threatened this ranch," she replied firmly. "This is my home now, too." The words slipped out before she could consider their implications, but once spoken, she knew they were true. This place, these people, they had become her home in a way Boston never had been. Hunter's expression softened. "Is it? Your home?" Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Yes, if you want it to be." "I do," Hunter said simply, the words carrying weight beyond their immediate context. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, acknowledging the shift in their relationship. Whatever had been building between them, respect, friendship, and something deeper, was now openly acknowledged. The moment was broken by Frank's arrival with news that the hands were all accounted for and security arrangements made for the night. "We should all try to get some rest," Hunter said, though his eyes never left Eleanor's face. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town and talk to Sheriff Blake, at least make him aware of the situation." Eleanor nodded, rising from her chair. "I'll go with you." Hunter looked as if he might object, then seemed to think better of it. "All right, together." That night, Eleanor lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. Her grandmother's ring gleamed faintly in the moonlight streaming through her window. She twisted it absently, thinking of how close she had come to trading it away that day in the mercantile. If Hunter hadn't been there, if he hadn't offered her work instead of charity, where would she be now? Certainly not here, in this house that was becoming a home, with a man who was becoming… what? More than an employer, more than a friend. The next morning brought heavy clouds and the promise of rain, unusual for the season, but welcome in the arid landscape. Eleanor dressed carefully in her best skirt and shirtwaist, aware that today's visit to town carried more significance than their previous trips. Hunter was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs, his expression softening when he saw her. "You look nice," he said simply. "Thank you." Eleanor felt a faint flush of pleasure at the compliment. "Are we ready to go?" "Nearly." Hunter hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small derringer. "I want you to take this." Eleanor stared at the gun. "Hunter, just as a precaution," he insisted. "It's small enough to carry in your pocket. I hope you never need it, but after yesterday." Eleanor slowly took the weapon, surprised at its weight despite its small size. "I've never fired a gun before." "It's simple enough. At close range, you can't miss." Hunter showed her how to cock and fire it, just in case we get separated in town. The fact that he considered this a real possibility sent a chill through Eleanor, but she nodded and carefully tucked the derringer into her pocket. The ride to town was tense, both of them scanning the trail for signs of trouble. They arrived without incident, the streets of Copper Canyon relatively quiet in the early hour. A few raindrops had begun to fall as they tied their horses in front of the sheriff's office. Sheriff Blake was a grizzled man in his 60s with a perpetually tired expression and eyes that had seen too much violence. He listened without interruption as Hunter explained about Tate's visit to the ranch and the history between them. "Can't arrest a man for making threats, Ford," the sheriff said when Hunter finished. "Not unless witnesses heard him directly threaten your life." "I'm not asking you to arrest him," Hunter replied. "Just to be aware. Tate won't leave town without forcing a confrontation." Blake sighed heavily. "I'll keep an eye on him and his boys. But my deputy's down with fever, and I'm just one man." "We understand," Eleanor said. "We just wanted you to know the situation." The sheriff's eyes traveled between them, noting something in their stance or expressions that made one gray eyebrow lift slightly. "I'll do what I can. You two be careful." As they left the sheriff's office, the rain began to fall more steadily. They hurried across the street to the mercantile, where Hunter needed to arrange for additional supplies. Inside, they found Mrs. Hank, the shopkeeper's wife, alone behind the counter. "Mr. Ford, Miss Gray," she greeted them with a warm smile. "What brings you to town on such a dreary day?" While Hunter discussed his order with Mrs. Hank, Eleanor browsed the shelves, selecting a few small personal items she needed: soap, hairpins, and a spool of thread for mending. She was examining a bolt of calico fabric when the bell above the door jingled. Looking up, she felt her blood run cold as Edwin Tate stepped into the store, followed by two of his men. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tate smiled, a predatory expression that never reached his eyes. "Well, isn't this convenient? The very people I was hoping to see." Hunter turned slowly from the counter, his body language casual but his eyes alert. "Tate, doing some shopping." "In a manner of speaking." Tate moved further into the store, his men spreading out slightly. "I'm in the market for justice, Ford. Been shopping for it for 8 years now." Mrs. Hank looked nervously between them. "Gentlemen, please. This is a respectable establishment." "Don't worry, madam," Tate said without looking at her. "We won't cause trouble in your fine store. Will we, Ford?" "I have no quarrel with you, Tate," Hunter replied evenly. "Not unless you force one." Tate laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet store. "No quarrel? You killed my brother." "After he tried to kill me," Hunter countered. "On your orders, as I recall." Tate's eyes narrowed. "You always did have a convenient memory." Eleanor watched this exchange with mounting dread, acutely aware of the small derringer in her pocket. She had positioned herself by a display of canned goods, partly hidden from Tate's men but with a clear view of Hunter and Tate. What do you want? Hunter asked directly. A public showdown? Is that how you see this ending? It would be fitting, Tate replied. The great Hunter Ford gunned down in the street like the dog he is. And if I refuse to play your game? Tate's smile widened. Then I start taking away the things you care about, one by one. His gaze slid meaningfully to Eleanor. Starting with the pretty lady. Hunter's expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. Leave her out of this. Too late for that, Tate said. She chose her side when she stood up for you yesterday. He turned his cold gaze fully on Eleanor. Though I'm still curious why. What lies has Ford told you, Miss? Gray, Eleanor supplied, her voice steadier than she felt. Eleanor Gray. And Mr. Ford has told me nothing but the truth, that you're a thief and a coward who hides behind others. Tate's face darkened with anger. Careful, Miss Gray. Pretty ladies shouldn't involve themselves in men's business. When that business threatens my home, it becomes my concern, Eleanor replied, moving closer to Hunter. Tate studied her for a moment, then looked back at Hunter with a knowing smirk. I see how it is. You found yourself a woman with spirit. Wonder if she'll still look at you the same way when she hears all the details of what happened 8 years ago. She knows enough, Hunter said. More than enough to recognize what kind of man you are. The tension in the store had reached a breaking point when the door opened again, admitting Sheriff Blake with his shotgun held ready. Thought I might find you boys here, he said, his weathered face grim. Now, I don't know what's going on, but I do know I won't have trouble in my town. Tate turned to face the sheriff, his hand hovering near his gun. No trouble, Sheriff. Just a friendly conversation. Didn't sound friendly to me, Blake replied. Sounded like threats were being made. You must have misheard. Blake's expression hardened. Maybe. Or maybe you and your friends should ride on, Tate. Copper Canyon isn't big enough for whatever grudge you're carrying. For a tense moment, Eleanor thought Tate might draw on the sheriff. Instead, he relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained cold. We were just leaving anyway, he said. Town's a bit too restrictive for my tastes. As he moved toward the door, he paused beside Eleanor. This isn't over, he said quietly, for her ears alone. Not by a long shot. Then he was gone, his men following behind him into the rain-swept street. Sheriff Blake lowered his shotgun. You two all right? Hunter nodded, moving to stand beside Eleanor. Thanks to your timing. Don't thank me yet, Blake warned. That man's not the type to let things go. He'll be back, and next time might not be in broad daylight in the middle of town. We'll be ready, Hunter assured him. Eleanor felt Hunter's hand touch the small of her back, a brief, steadying gesture that grounded her. We should get back to the ranch, she suggested, before the rain gets worse. Hunter agreed, quickly finalizing his order with Mrs. Hank, who looked relieved to see them go. Outside, the rain had intensified, turning the main street into a river of mud. They mounted their horses and set off for home, both scanning the surrounding buildings for any sign of Tate or his men. They were nearly at the edge of town when a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up mud just ahead of Hunter's horse. The animal reared in panic as Hunter fought to control it. Ride! He shouted to Eleanor, drawing his revolver as he wheeled his horse around to face the direction of the shot. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before spurring her horse forward, away from town. She looked back once to see Hunter returning fire toward a figure on a rooftop, before he too turned and galloped after her. They rode hard through the rain, not slowing until they were well out of rifle range. Only then did Hunter pull alongside her. Are you all right? He asked, his voice tight with concern. Yes, Eleanor gasped, her heart still pounding from their narrow escape. You? Fine. Shot missed. Hunter's expression was grim as he scanned the trail behind them. But it proves what I feared. Tate's not waiting for a fair fight. They continued toward the ranch at a more sustainable pace, the rain soaking them to the skin. Eleanor was shivering by the time they reached the main house, as much from reaction to the danger as from the cold. Martha exclaimed in dismay at their bedraggled appearance and immediately set about heating water for baths while Frank took their horses to the stable. Later, warmed and dressed in dry clothes, Eleanor found Hunter in the office, cleaning his revolver with the same methodical care she had observed that night in the kitchen. He looked up as she entered, his eyes traveling over her as if reassuring himself she was truly unharmed. "That was no warning shot," he said without preamble. "Tate meant to kill me." "What are we going to do?" Eleanor asked, taking the seat across from him. Hunter set the gun down carefully. "I'm not sure we have many options. The ranch is defensible, but we can't stay here forever. Eventually we'll need supplies, or I'll need to drive cattle to market. Could we send for help? The territorial marshal, perhaps?" Hunter shook his head. By the time a marshal arrived, this would likely be over one way or another. Eleanor felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. "You're considering facing him, aren't you? Going into town and ending this?" "It might be the only way," Hunter admitted. "Tate won't leave as long as I'm alive. And now he's shown he's willing to risk murder in broad daylight." "There has to be another solution," Eleanor insisted, her voice rising with emotion. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for a madman's vendetta." Hunter's expression softened at her outburst. "Eleanor." "No," she cut him off, rising from her chair. "I refuse to accept that the only way forward is for you to walk into his trap. There must be another way." Hunter stood and moved around the desk to stand before her. "What would you suggest?" Eleanor's mind raced. "Set a trap of our own," she said finally. "Make him come to us on our terms, where we have the advantage." Hunter considered her words, his expression thoughtful. "It would need to be convincing. Tate's not a fool." "Then we'll be more convincing," Eleanor said with determination. "You've said the sheriff is on our side. Perhaps he could help." A plan began to form between them, each contributing ideas until they had crafted a strategy that might work. It was risky, but it offered a better chance than a direct confrontation in town. As they finalized the details, Hunter's hand covered hers on the desk. "Eleanor," he said softly, "if this goes wrong—" "It won't," she interrupted, turning her hand to clasp his. "But if it does," he persisted, "I need you to know something." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "When you came into my life when you tried to trade your ring for bread, I had no idea how much would change. I offered you work, but you've given me so much more." Eleanor felt her heart quicken. "Hunter, let me finish," he said gently. "I've been alone for a long time, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. But with you, for the first time in years, I've felt like I'm home." He squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. But she blinked them away. This was no time for weakness. "Nothing is going to happen to you tomorrow," she said firmly, "because I refuse to lose my home again." Hunter's lips curved in a slight smile. "Is that the only reason?" Eleanor met his gaze directly. "No," she admitted softly. "It's not the only reason." Hunter lifted his free hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "When this is over," he promised, "we'll have time to explore all the reasons." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the previous day's rain leaving the desert air clean and the sky a brilliant blue. Eleanor dressed carefully in her simplest clothes, her hands steady despite the danger she knew lay ahead. Their plan had been set in motion the previous evening, when Frank had ridden into town with a message for Sheriff Blake. Now, all they could do was wait and hope that Tate took the bait. Hunter found her on the porch, watching the road with anxious eyes. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Eleanor nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Remember," Hunter said, his voice low and urgent, "if anything goes wrong, you get to safety. Promise me." "I promise," Eleanor replied, though they both knew it was a promise she might not keep. The waiting was the hardest part. Hours crawled by with no sign of movement on the road. The ranch hands went about their duties with an air of forced normalcy, though each carried a weapon and kept watch on the surrounding landscape. It was past noon when Frank, stationed as lookout on the barn roof, gave the signal they had been waiting for 4 riders approaching from the direction of town. "They've come," Eleanor said, her mouth suddenly dry. Hunter nodded grimly. "Just as we hoped." He turned to her, his expression intense. "Stay inside until I call for you. please." Eleanor nodded, reluctantly retreating into the house as Hunter took his position on the porch. Seemingly alone but with ranch hands hidden in strategic locations around the yard. From her place at the window, Eleanor watched as Tate and his men rode into the yard. They spread out slightly as they approached, their posture wary despite their numerical advantage. "Ford!" Tate called, reining in his horse. "Heard you were looking for me." Hunter stepped forward, his stance casual, though Eleanor could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thought we might settle this once and for all, Tate. Just you and me." Tate's laugh carried clearly through the window. "Why would I agree to that when I have 3 men backing me?" "Because you've always claimed to be a man of honor," Hunter replied, "and because Sheriff Blake knows exactly where you are and why." This gave Tate pause. Blake's an old man. He won't interfere. Perhaps not, but he's already sent a telegraph to the territorial marshal. If I'm killed, they'll know who did it. Tate considered this, his eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Hunter shrugged. "Take that chance if you want, or we can end this like men, just you and me." Eleanor held her breath, watching the calculations play out on Tate's face. This was the crucial moment. Would he accept the challenge, or would he and his men simply open fire? After a long pause, Tate dismounted. "Always figured it would end this way," he said, handing his reins to one of his companions. "You and me, Ford, for Daniel." "For the truth," Hunter countered, stepping off the porch. Eleanor's heart pounded as the 2 men faced each other in the yard, 20 paces apart. This wasn't part of the plan. Hunter was supposed to keep Tate talking until Sheriff Blake arrived with his deputy and the 2 former soldiers who had agreed to help. But now, Hunter stood exposed, facing a man who had spent 8 years nurturing his hatred, if the sheriff didn't arrive soon. As if summoned by her thoughts, Eleanor caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the property riders, approaching quietly from the side, using the trees as cover. The sheriff had arrived, but he was still too far away to intervene. Tate's men hadn't noticed the newcomers, their attention fixed on the confrontation about to unfold. Tate himself had eyes only for Hunter, his hand hovering near his gun. "Any last words, Ford?" Tate called, a cruel smile playing at his lips. Hunter remained calm, his voice steady. "Just that I'm sorry about your brother. He didn't deserve to die for your schemes." Tate's face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare speak of him." With that, he went for his gun. Eleanor gasped as both men drew, the sounds of their shots blending into one explosive report. Tate staggered backward, a look of surprise crossing his face as his gun slipped from his fingers. Hunter remained standing, though Eleanor could see he was favoring his left side. For a moment, no one moved. Then one of Tate's men cursed and reached for his weapon. Before he could fire, shots rang out from multiple directions as the ranch hands emerged from their hiding places and Sheriff Blake's group charged into the yard. The ensuing confusion was brief but violent. One of Tate's men fell immediately, another threw down his gun in surrender, and the third managed to mount his horse and flee, pursued by 2 of Blake's men. Eleanor rushed from the house to Hunter's side. He was still standing, one hand pressed to his side where blood seeped through his shirt. "You're hit," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Just grazed," Hunter assured her, though his face was pale. "Tate?" They both looked to where Tate lay motionless in the dust. Sheriff Blake knelt beside him, checking for signs of life before shaking his head grimly. "It's over," Blake announced, rising to his feet. "Clean shot, Ford. Won't be any charges." Relief flooded through Eleanor as she helped Hunter to a chair on the porch. Martha hurried out with bandages and water, immediately setting to work on his wound. "You were supposed to wait for the sheriff," Eleanor scolded gently as she assisted Martha. Hunter winced as Martha cleaned the wound. Tate wasn't going to wait. I could see it in his eyes. "It's not deep," Martha pronounced after examining the injury. "Bullet just caught the flesh at your side. You're lucky." "I know," Hunter replied, his eyes finding Eleanor's. "Luckier than I deserve to be." The aftermath of the shootout kept them busy for hours. Statements were taken, bodies removed, and the wounded Tate man taken into custody. By evening, the ranch had returned to an uneasy calm, though everyone remained vigilant in case the escaped man returned. Eleanor found Hunter in the office again, looking out the window at the sunset, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. His side was bandaged, his movements careful but steady. "Sheriff Blake just left," she said, closing the door behind her. "He says the man they caught has confessed that Tate planned to kill you and then burn the ranch. He wanted no witnesses." Hunter nodded, unsurprised. "That sounds like Tate. Always thorough in his vengeance." He turned to face her. "It's truly over now, after 8 years." Eleanor moved to stand beside him at the window. "What happens now?" Hunter was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Now we build," he said finally. "The ranch, the herd, the future. If that's still what you want." Eleanor felt a flutter of hope in her chest. "Is that what you want?" Hunter turned to face her fully, his eyes serious. "Eleanor, when I saw you in that store, ready to trade your grandmother's ring for bread, something told me you were important, that meeting you wasn't chance." "I felt it too," she admitted softly, though I was too proud and hungry to recognize it then. Hunter smiled, reaching out to take her hand. His thumb brushed over her grandmother's ring, still on her finger where it belonged. "You kept the ring, and found both bread and—" He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "And love," Eleanor finished for him, her heart in her voice. "You promised me both that day, even if you didn't realize it." Hunter's smile deepened as he drew her gently into his arms, mindful of his injured side. "I meant to keep that promise from the moment I made it," he murmured. "I just didn't know how completely you would claim my heart." Eleanor looked up into his eyes, seeing all the things they had yet to say to each other, all the promises yet to be made. "Then make me another promise," she whispered. "Anything," Hunter replied without hesitation. "Promise me a home. Promise me roots. Promise me that we build this life together." Hunter's answer was to lower his lips to hers in a kiss that spoke of tenderness and passion, of promises kept and futures entwined. When they finally parted, his eyes were bright with emotion. "I promise," he said simply. "All of it and more." As the last light of day faded from the sky, Eleanor leaned her head against Hunter's shoulder, feeling truly at home for the first time in her life. Her grandmother's ring caught the lamplight, a circle of gold that had once represented her past, but now symbolized her future, a future filled with bread and love, just as Hunter had promised. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Eleanor stood in the newly renovated parlor of the ranch house, Martha helping her with the final touches of her wedding dress. It was a simple gown of ivory satin, elegant rather than elaborate, but Eleanor had never felt more beautiful. "Hunter won't know what hit him when he sees you," Martha said, fastening the last button. "You're a vision, my dear." Eleanor smiled, smoothing the fabric with nervous hands. "I can hardly believe this day has come." So much had changed in the months since the confrontation with Tate. The ranch had flourished under their combined efforts, with Hunter's knowledge of cattle and Eleanor's management of the finances creating a prosperous operation. The loan from the bank had been secured and used to purchase additional cattle, which were already showing promise of a substantial return. But more important than the financial success was the home they had built together. The house had been transformed from a neglected structure to a warm, inviting dwelling filled with laughter and plans for the future. Eleanor's touch was evident in every room, from the cheerful curtains to the bookshelves filled with volumes ordered from back east. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Frank peered in, his weathered face split by a wide grin. "It's time, Miss Eleanor. Everyone's ready." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I'm ready too." The ceremony was being held in the ranch yard, decorated with wildflowers and ribbons for the occasion. Most of the town had turned out, along with neighboring ranchers and their families. Even Sheriff Blake had dressed in his Sunday best for the event, standing near the front with a rare smile on his face. As Eleanor stepped out onto the porch, her arm linked with Frank's who had offered to give her away, the assembled guests rose to their feet. But Eleanor had eyes only for Hunter, waiting for her beside the pastor. He stood tall and strong, completely healed from his wound, his face alight with joy as he watched her approach. In that moment, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that all the hardships she had endured, the loss of her parents, her fiancé's betrayal, the desperate journey west, even the hunger that had driven her to offer her grandmother's ring for bread, all of it had led her to this place, this man, this life. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows spoken with clear voices that carried across the yard. When Hunter slipped a simple gold band alongside her grandmother's ring, Eleanor felt the circle of their story complete. From that first day when she had tried to trade her ring for bread, to this moment when a new ring joined it as a symbol of their union, it was a journey neither could have predicted, but both now treasured. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "Mr. Ford, you may kiss your bride." As Hunter's lips met hers, sealing their vows with a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows, Eleanor knew she had found everything she had ever wanted, but had been too afraid to dream of a home, a purpose, and a love that had seen past her desperate circumstances to the woman she truly was. The celebration that followed was joyous and lively, with food and music lasting well into the evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the same glorious colors as the day Hunter had first promised her a future, Eleanor found a moment of quiet with her new husband on the porch of their home. "Happy, Mrs. Ford?" Hunter asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," Eleanor replied, leaning into his embrace, "though I still can't quite believe how much has changed since that day in the mercantile." Hunter smiled, lifting her hand to place a gentle kiss on her fingers, just above where both rings now rested. "I knew then that you were special, Eleanor. I just didn't know how completely you would change my life." "We changed each other's lives," she corrected softly. "You gave me bread when I was hungry, but you also gave me purpose, hope, love. And you gave me a home," Hunter said, his voice deep with emotion. "Not just this place, but here." He placed his hand over his heart. For a man who'd been drifting for years, that's the greatest gift imaginable. As the first stars appeared in the twilight sky, Hunter and Eleanor Ford stood together on the porch of their ranch house, looking out at the land that was now truly theirs, not just in legal ownership, but in the deeper sense of belonging that comes from building something together, from facing dangers side by side, from choosing each other every day. Eleanor's grandmother's ring caught the last light of day, glinting alongside the newer band that had joined it. Two circles of gold representing her past and her future, now inseparable on her hand, just as she and Hunter were inseparable in life. "Bread and love," she murmured, remembering Hunter's words from that first fateful day. Hunter smiled, understanding immediately. "I always keep my promises, Mrs. Ford." "I'm counting on that," Eleanor replied, turning in his arms to face him, "for all our tomorrows." As their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of those tomorrows, Eleanor knew that her grandmother had been right about the ring. It truly did represent the strength of the women in her family. But it now represented something more, the journey that had brought her to this place, this moment, this love. She had tried to trade her ring for bread, but instead had found a man who insisted she keep the ring and offered her both bread and love. In the wild Arizona territory of 1874, Eleanor Gray Ford had found something many spent lifetimes searching for: a place to belong, a person to love, and a future to build, one day at a time. And that was worth more than all the gold in any ring, more precious than any gem, more sustaining than any bread. It was, quite simply, everything.